the ride.
We ain't one at a time in here. We're mass communicating.
You're listening to Para X.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.
Create the time with every move and line. Jackal guard against the moon, and the game will be over soon. Can you hear the earth sighing as he turns towards the sky? The time of Ra is ending, and the sun begins to die. See her in the night. Can you feel it changing? Sky and earth, they are as one. Conceived daughter and son, sister, lover, goddess, queen, mother to every living being. Your light creates a shadow as you show your face unveiled. Your brother said betrays you. There's a coffin on the Nile. Can you feel it changing? See her in the night. Can you feel it changing? 1, conceived daughter and son, sister, lover, goddess, queen, mother to every living being. Your light creates a shadow as you show your face unveiled. Your brother said betrays you. There's a coffin on the Nile. Can you feel it changing? Can you see her in the night? Can you feel it changing? Pieces to the wind, to all parts of the land. Scattered widely she will find, but form a lover from her hands. The sky her tears of gladness fall to the fertile ground, and set lost in his madness to the desert he is bound. Can you feel it changing? Can you see her in the night? Can you feel it changing?
Welcome to Stirring the Cauldron. Now, here's your host, Marla Brooks.
Hey, merry meet everybody, and welcome to Stirring the Cauldron here on the ParaX Radio Network. My opening song tonight was called Isis Unveiled by Dave the Bard. And as you know, Isis is one of the most important goddesses of ancient Egypt. She's still revered today by pagans. As a mourner, she was a principal deity in rites connected with the dead. As magical healer, she cured the sick and brought the deceased to life. And as mother, she was a role model for all women. Now, I'm telling you this because my guest is author Eleanor Harris, and she has studied and practiced Egyptian divination and magic for more than 9 years. For the past several years, she's been active in a contemporary House of Life, which is dedicated to teaching and practicing traditional Egyptian magic. And tonight we're going to be talking about her book, Ancient Egyptian Magic. And as always, if you have a question for Eleanor and you're in the ParaX chat room, please send me a private message and I'll pass the question on. And if you're not in the chat room but would like to join us, come over to www.para-x.com, click Listen Live, and poof, you're going to be in the chat room with a ton of people. It's really crowded today. And the more the merrier, so come on down. All right, welcome, Eleanor, that being said.
Well, thank you. I appreciate being here.
Well, I appreciate you writing a book that grabbed my interest so quickly. That doesn't always happen, and so I was very happy when they said that you would be available to do it, so this is great. I read in your bio that you inherited your interest in Egyptian religion and magic from your father. Tell us about his interest in it and how you got involved then as well.
Well, my father had traveled internationally for business, and one of his favorite countries to visit was Egypt. And when he was there, he really took a lot of time to learn about the ancient civilization of Egypt and got very interested in both the religious and magical philosophies of the ancient Egyptians, and he brought that home to us. Now, I have to say my mother really wasn't thrilled with this. Being a, Christian woman herself, she was a little, just taken aback by his interest in it. But both my sister and I sort of learned through him and studied ancient Egyptian religion and magic, and that's how I grew to, that's, I guess I would say, the seed that started this book.
Well, it was a good one to plant, sometimes interest spreads like wildfire. And the book offers a practical collection of Egyptian divination and magical instruction. And I like the fact that you say that while it's for beginners, it's also enticing to the more experienced practitioners as well. So basically, you would say there was something for everyone and then some, right?
Yes.
Okay. Now, one thing that I read early on in the book, and it surprised me, but yet it didn't, was that the book offers a practical collection of Egyptian divination and magic. But the thing is that the belief in magic, which is what I read, is older in Egypt than the belief in God. And like I said, that doesn't surprise me. The Egyptian religion was grounded kind of in a firm and active belief in the importance of magic. So let's talk about that. Let's talk about the philosophies, both religious and magic, how they blend together, because I don't think I've ever heard of another culture that believed in magic before they believed in their deity, their God, right?
You're absolutely right, Marla. In fact, that's what makes ancient Egyptian magic and their religion so interesting, is that the ancient Egyptians actually started with a belief in magic before they became so devout in religion. So the ancient Egyptians did not have a strict religious doctrine. They never did. They believed in a creator, and they also had gods and goddesses that possessed human and animal characteristics, and those gods and goddesses oversaw many factors of life, whether it's fertility, judgment, truth, all sorts of different factors of life. An example would be the goddess Mat, who represents order and judgment. And the gods and goddesses helped the Egyptian magicians control and dominate the beings and energies of nature for the purpose of assuming their powers to carry out tasks and desires through magic. So the ancient Egyptians recognized the battle between order and chaos. They believed in resurrection and immortality. So their magic related to both the living and the dead.
Mm-hmm. And, we're calling them gods and goddesses, but somebody's out there scratching their head saying, well, if there was no religion, why are they calling them gods? Right? Or,
Well, mm-hmm.
You see where I'm coming from, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, it was a very, what I love about the ancient Egyptian religion, if we can call it a religion, is that their spirituality was nature-based.
Right.
Much like, it's very different than Wicca, but in many ways it's similar because it had to do with the earth. Their temples
mm-hmm.
were symbolic of the earth.
Mm-hmm.
Their gods and goddesses were human and animal beings that
mm-hmm.
represented characteristics of both. So
right.
it really was a nature and earth-based religion, and that's, where it's rooted from.
Mm-hmm. Now, some people talk about magic being either black or white, while others say that magic is neither. It just is, What does Egyptian philosophy lean towards?
Ancient Egyptian magic cannot be easily classified as black and white because it consists of two types of magic. The first would be magic that benefits the living or the dead. The second would be magic that hinders the living or the dead, such as throwing a curse. The ancient Egyptians practiced healing magic and love spells, but they also believed in fighting fire with fire. So if someone betrayed an ancient Egyptian, chances are he or she worked magic to ensure payback.
Mm-hmm. And, it's funny when you discuss black or white magic in this day and age, because darker practitioners think they're doing it for the greater good, just as the white witches, or whatever you want to call them, do too. So I think it's all in somebody's mind. If you say dark magic, people go, but it doesn't always mean that it's really dark and bad. It's just kind of the way you look at things, right?
That's true. It all has to do with the will of the magician, no matter what type of magic you're practicing. We always try, when I say we, I like to think most people try to practice magic that, will not necessarily harm others, but that gets their desires or will out into reality, and so that their needs are met through the magic. But truthfully, ancient Egyptians, they did not have a problem with throwing curses. If someone betrayed them, they were very much passionate about making sure that person, had payback. So that's just the reality of their religion and their magical practices.
I kind of think that's the reality of our magical practices and religion in this day and age too, because you just don't want to let somebody get away with something, and I was talking to a Strega witch one time, and Stregas are kind of like what she described as the vigilantes of the magical world. If they see something wrong in their mind, they're going to write it in their mind, right or wrong, and they don't care about karma. They said, well, it's on us, but if I see something that, somebody's hurting somebody, I'm going to throw a whammy on them, for lack of a better term. And they said, it just doesn't matter. We're here to do the right thing. And I said, well, people kind of worry about Strega every so often. If you say that somebody's Strega, they go, and they're kind of afraid. I said, what do you say to someone who tells you that they're afraid of Strega? And she didn't miss a beat. She says, they ought to be. That was great.
Right.
She's good. So again, black and white, just it doesn't cut it. And I've said this before. I know that even a Wiccan or somebody that just does not even believe in cursing or anything on the negative aspect, if they see something happening to someone they love, something bad, or there is a line that can be crossed in dire times. I don't think anybody is so perfectly innocent of that, because we all get mad, we all do something, and if a loved one is being injured or hurt or something, it's human nature to kind of throw things back, I would think.
Yes, and also what's interesting about ancient Egyptian magic that coincides with what you're talking about is they had what was linen knot or cord magic, which they would actually take a piece of linen and knot or cord it, and they would speak words of power over this and actually bind someone in the knot. In other words, okay, you can't really call it black magic because you're not harming that person. Mm-hmm. You're just binding them. You're trying to stop them from doing something. Like, for example, let's say an ancient Egyptian person had a coworker, which we can all relate to this, who was maybe, trying to make you look bad or trying to take your promotion or whatever else. Well, an ancient Egyptian might perform linen knot or cord magic to bind that person, and the binding is actually to capture them and stop them from moving forward with their will. So there's kind of a gray area. It's not necessarily black magic. It's almost, you want to say, preventative magic. It's like I'm trying to stop this person from harming me or toying with my fate and destiny.
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think binding spells are necessary at times. I mean, of course, we're warned against them. Some people say, don't do a binding spell. You're going to bind yourself when you do it, that kind of thing. But there are some instances where people are on you and on you and on you and out to get you. And rather than throwing, making a voodoo doll and sticking pins in it or much worse, I think a binding spell is kind of an easier way to take care of something without doing a whole lot of damage. So, I don't see anything wrong with it if it's absolutely necessary. And, they all say in general, when you're doing magic for certain things, unless you have exhausted every mundane possible way to deal with it, don't do the magic. About the ancient temples, what do they have to do with worship and magic?
Well, ancient Egyptian temples symbolize the earth. Spiritual and magical practices take place in the temple. They're called houses of life or mansions of whichever god or goddess they served, such as the House of Horus. Typically, a temple would choose one god or goddess that was their main deity. And then that would be the deity of the main sanctuary, and the other rooms would be dedicated to lesser deities. Animals were kept in the temples, and they were revered as manifestations of the gods and goddesses that they represented. The worship itself, as far as religious worship, was very simple and direct. Only special ceremonies were lengthy in praises spoken, and the only reason I mention that is to sort of compare it to today. When you think of like a Catholic church ceremony, you realize there's a lot of incense, ceremony, very lengthy, a lot of words spoken. In ancient Egypt, their worship was a little less ceremonial. It was more direct and very simple. But like I said, there were festivals and certain ceremonies, funeral ceremonies, for example, in which lengthy praises were spoken. But worship, for the most part, was an exchange of favors between the priest or priestess and the deity. For example, if someone, say an average Egyptian, maybe a merchant, desired a new career as a wine shop owner, they would ask the priestess or a priest to offer the deity wine. And then once the wine was offered, the god or goddess would then award you with success in your new career.
So everything kind of was done around the temple, but did people, like now we have altars in our homes and things, did they also? Or was
they
all...
did.
Yeah.
Yes, the average ancient Egyptian also had altars like in their homes, but it's interesting, there were certain occasions, like, for example, fortune telling or divination. The average Egyptian did not feel as though they were able to do that for whatever reason. So then they would go to the temple and ask a priest or priestess to please conduct this divination for them so that they could foretell the future or, request the priest or priestess make an offering on their behalf to the god or goddess. Now, that doesn't mean that there weren't individual magicians, so to speak, in ancient Egypt. There were. But it really depended on the confidence of the particular person as to whether or not they felt they could go through with that magical spell or divination.
We kind of have the same thing about confidence and making things work, too. So, yeah. All right. The other thing that interested me is about fate and destiny. How does that play into all this?
Well, ancient Egyptians believed that a person's fate and destiny was decided at birth. So the common man or woman would visit a priest or priestess at the temple to request that magic be performed if they wanted to change their fate or destiny. This could be because, say, they were born into a family that was perhaps farming, and they wanted to get more into merchandising or something. They might visit a priest or priestess at the temple to say, I'd like to have some sort of magic. I'd like to offer something to the deities so that I can change my fate. This seems to be what I'm born into. I'd like to do something different. So that was very commonplace. The goddess of fate and destiny, who is known as Scry, also was summoned in Magick for this purpose. But if the person wasn't sure what their destiny was, and I mean, let's face it, a lot of people in life, they go through grade school, they come out, they're getting ready to go to college, and they're like, my God, I don't know what I should do in life. I'm not sure what my destiny should be. Mm-hmm. Well, much was the same to the ancient Egyptians. You know, sometimes you just don't know what should I be doing? And so if their destiny was not known, or they felt that their life was off track, they would consult with a priest or priestess to perform divination to reveal their fate and destiny.
Mm-hmm. What kind of divination methods were common back then?
Well, divination is foretelling the future. Mm-hmm. Today, many Wiccans and pagans use something like tarot cards to do that. Mm-hmm. In ancient Egypt, they used fire, water, or oil to see the future. For example, oil lamps made of alabaster were used for fire scrying. They also used bowls that were filled with water and oil, or just oil, that were used for scrying.
And I was just going to get into a little bit about the ritual tools and tools for magic. And there's some similarities and differences between then and now. I mean, okay, so bowls we use, censers, oil and incense are kind of across the board in most traditions of modern day. But like you said, oil lamps are not. And then I also saw bricks and lily scepters, not so much. But to effectively work with Egyptian magic in today's day and age, is it necessary to learn and use the proper tools that they used back then, or how do you work that out?
Well, I would say the more modern Egyptian magicians do typically use either oil lamps that we have today. See, what's kind of interesting is the ancient Egyptians, and I'll be honest with you, I don't quite understand why this is. I've studied so many papyri, ancient papyri, and there's no clear answer to this, but they specify that the oil lamps must be white, which is why most of the ancient oil lamps were made of alabaster. So today, a lot of modern Egyptian magicians will use some sort of white oil lamp that they can use for oil scrying, or again, they will use bowls made with water or oil to do their divination. But I think that is the most practical way that you can practice ancient Egyptian divination, is to just use either the oil lamps or the bowls filled with water and oil. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what did they use bricks for? That, I saw that and I'm like, huh? How did that work?
Well, bricks they used, it's sort of interesting because they would actually use bricks to set the oil lamps on, and they would also use bricks to just be, as funny as this may sound, like a portable altar. A lot of the common ancient Egyptians did not have the wooden or stone altars that were in the temple. So when they were out and about, a brick served as sort of, their little foundation to do their magic upon. And that is really the basis for using a brick in ancient Egyptian magic.
Okay, it's like, what did they do when the bricks were being formed? Did they draw hieroglyphics in them or something? I just, couldn't figure out exactly what, but that makes very good sense what you said.
Well, yes, and you're right, Marla, and many times when they had a brick that they would use, because when you think about it, commoners did not have access to a lot of the stone and finer materials that maybe the priests and priestesses in the temples had. So if they could get a hold of a brick, and many times they would then carve upon the brick, certain religious and magical symbols, hieroglyphics that would, mean something to them or represent a certain god or goddess that they worked with on a regular basis.
Okay. That makes sense. Just looking at a question I got from chat. They say that they're assuming that since whales were limited in Egypt, did they use flax oil for their lamps? He said they used oils from nuts as well, but pretty sure flax might have been more economical at the time.
Well, that's a very interesting question because they did use a lot of essential oils and a lot of natural oils and oils from animals as well. So, yes, if they could get their hands on that, certainly that would be something that they would have used.
Yeah, okay. Now, I was also reading in the book about Egyptian magical script and scripts, and that they were used more than just for recital during spell casting. Magicians hoped to absorb the Heka into their bodies. For what purposes, and is it still being done?
It is. Now, Heka, just to explain, is actually the name of the god of magic in ancient Egypt. Heka is a god who is believed to have fused together the universe. He also has a female equivalent, and her name means great of magic, Wortet Haku. She is depicted as a cobra, and she is often represented by the snake-shaped short rods used by Egyptian magicians. If you see, temple hieroglyphics and drawings, you will often see the cobra short rods held by magicians. But you're absolutely right, because the magical script actually has 4 primary parts. The first is to invoke deities or unworldly beings by the use of magical names. These are like names of power. Also to enable the magician's mind so that he or she can focus and concentrate to work magic. Also for the ability to shapeshift into a god form or being form to work magic. Now, this is very important because unlike a lot of different pagan religions and magical practices, the ancient Egyptians believed that they could shapeshift into a god form. If I decided that I needed, through a love spell, to shapeshift into a goddess that represented love, I could do that and then go visit my lover. There's a lot of spells that used shapeshifting, so that was very important to them. Also, magical script was used to charge a talisman. A talisman is an object to provide good luck or protection. Also to charge an amulet, which is an ornament or jewelry thought to give protection against evil, danger, or disease. And then also to cast a spell.
I want to go back to shape-shifting for a minute, just for a brief minute, because I was really fascinated when I was reading that in the book. How common is that nowadays? Are people still doing that?
Yes, people are still doing that. It's interesting because in a lot of pagan religions, you'll find that shape-shifting is a very unique and challenging practice. I think it's something that probably is practiced by the more experienced magician. It takes some time to actually master the concentration and visualization and out-of-body experience that is needed to be able to do that. I don't think it's something that the beginner would be comfortable with or would be able to achieve. But certainly, I mean, with practice, like anything else, you certainly would be able to. But yes, shape-shifting is something that magicians, both ancient and modern, that practice Egyptian magic, definitely use.
In your research, because I'm sure you've dug deep to all of this stuff, have you personally tried it? Experienced it?
Yes, I have. I actually have used it, which, I can't speak for magicians that I have known in this realm. I'm not sure exactly, because some people are very private about what they would use shape-shifting exercise for. Because in many times what you would do, you would shape-shift into a god form. And then that is part of your magical script. You would become that god or that being, and you would say, I am Horus, and I am hair of the gods, and this is what I am here to accomplish. And the idea is you want to be able to influence and have full domination over the beings and energies of nature, and things like that. I have used it for healing magic. I have actually shape-shifted into goddesses that are known for healing, and then gone through meditation and visualization to the actual individual that I'm trying to heal, and perform, healing magic that way.
Yeah, it's a whole new light as far as, some people would be concerned too, because I think with the advent of pop culture and stuff, shape-shifting might consist of, turning into a cat or, something like that, rather than embodying a deity and using that power of that deity. I think shape-shifting is just basically thought of in general as, to a different being, to a different animal, but not necessarily for any good, maybe, except maybe hiding, thinking you're hiding or something like that. So some people will say, they're saying it's not possible, but in the context of the way you're explaining shape-shifting, it's quite possible.
Well, and you bring up some good points. In many different areas of magic, and I'm not just talking about Egyptian, I'm talking Wiccan and different pagan magical practices, a lot of times shape-shifting is used to spy, maybe spy on a lover, or, to go out and perform some sort of astral magic or exercise. So I'm not saying it's really different from that. It just has such a wide variety of uses. But in ancient Egyptian uses, quite honestly, it was used for healing, but it was also used for spying. I mean, a lot of ancient Egyptians would use that to spy on their employer or their wife or different people. So it's just like magic itself. It's whatever your will wants it to be, and, manifests it as such.
So today's modern times, how closely is Egyptian magic practiced as it was back then? There have to be some allowances for change, I think, but overall, is it pretty much the same?
Well, it's very similar, because tradition Egyptian magic can be practiced in a temple or anywhere by an individual. The beauty, what I call the beauty of ancient Egyptian religion and magic, is that it was very direct and personal. Whether it was for the average Egyptian person or the priest or priestess, there was this one-on-one communication with deity. And so for that fact, most modern practitioners have come to use the translated ancient papyri that describes the methods of how to both worship and conduct magic, or they'll use books like mine that contain all of the information that you need. But in either case, the idea is to ensure authentic and traditional practice of the ancient Egyptian ways.
Mm-hmm. Now, I know for a fact that practitioners in our time call upon Egyptian deities, many different ones, in their everyday magic. So you don't necessarily have to practice Egyptian magic to call upon these deities, correct?
Absolutely not, no. And, you know, I've never really, a lot of people have asked me that question, like, oh, you know, do I have to be, see, this is going back to what I said earlier. The beauty of the ancient Egyptian magic is that they never had dogma. They never had strict religious doctrines. So nobody was, you know, having to conform to a religious idea. They actually started with magic first. Magic came before religious doctrines, I guess is the easiest way to say it. So anyone, whether you're Wiccan, whether you are Celtic, if you have a situation where you want to perform magic or divination and you think, hey, you know, an Egyptian god or goddess who specializes in this particular subject may be of special use to me, then absolutely. I mean, I see absolutely no reason why you couldn't call upon them to help you or to use, you know, an Egyptian deity in your magic.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are very much into animals, for example, or cats in particular, and calling upon Bast would be like one of the deities that would be good for that, right?
Absolutely. Yes, and that's one of the beauties of ancient Egyptian religion and magic is that they were so in tune with all of the living creatures of the earth. And that's how, personally, I wish all religions were. I mean, it doesn't matter to me if it's Christian, Buddhism, Hinduism, paganism. I would like to see every religion on earth be so attuned to the living creatures that we share this planet with. But since ancient Egyptian religion was that way, then certainly a lot of more modern religions do tend to reach back and say, hey, you know, they really have some interesting magical and divination concepts that might work for us. And yes, they can definitely be incorporated in whatever you're doing now in contemporary times.
And I think it's important, no matter what path you're on, what kind of magic you practice, I think it's very important to look back to the old ways. Again, there are times in modern day that you have to make some adjustments, some alterations, but following the old religions, to me, it's a stronger way of practicing. It's like kind of the salt of the earth. It's where it came from. And there's something wrong with neo-religions at all, or neo-practices.
No.
But there's something about going back to the roots that I think is really important. And I just got a really good question in the chat room. How important is ancient Egyptian magic in modern Egypt today?
That is a very good question, and I'll be honest with you, I really don't have a good answer, only because I have very few modern Egyptian contacts. I do have, in the House of Life that I belong to, we do have some Egyptian practitioners from, like, Cairo, but there aren't, see, this is what's interesting. A lot of a lot of residents overseas, especially in the Middle East and in Asia, they're so fascinated by Western culture that they're more interested in learning about us than trying to teach us about them. And that's what I have found. I can't really answer that question because my Egyptian modern contacts, they just want to know from me, how can I become more westernized? You know, they're fascinated with our fashion, they're fascinated with our entertainment. So unfortunately, I just don't have a good answer to that question.
Okay. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about the House of Life that you're active in. Tell me about it.
Well, it actually was started about a decade ago by a gentleman in New York State who had visited Cairo and studied there for many years. And the House of Life, to which I belong, is a temple. Like in ancient Egypt, it is dedicated to a main deity, and in this case, it is the god Thoth, who is the god of writing, science, magic, and many other things, including language. He is most often depicted as an abyss-headed god with a human body, and we use methods of worship and magic as recorded in the Papyrus Ani, the Leyden Papyrus, and others, also including the Egyptian Book of the Dead. But as a priestess of Thoth, my main focus at this point, since I've been a member of this particular House of Life for over a decade, is now education. I want to educate about ancient Egyptian religion, magic, and divination. So that's what I'm primarily focused on at this point. I'll be honest, I don't work a lot of magical spells today as I did years ago, only because I'm so focused on teaching others about it.
I think, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think when we all start out, it's all about the spells. You know, in the sense that we can do them, we need to try them, we need to see if we can work them, you know, that kind of thing. I think the longer that we're practitioners, the lesser the need. You know, it won't be for every little drop of something, okay, I got to do a spell on that. You know, like in the beginning. I mean, you know, it's like kids growing up. You get really excited about something, but then you start learning that there are so many other things and so many other ways and stuff. So spell work is important at times. It's very important at times. But as I said, the longer you're a practitioner, I think the less you need to fall back on that. And you know as well as I do, there are plenty of witches out there that don't do any spell work at all. You know, they're busy doing everything else. They're worshiping nature. They're doing, you know, whatever. And also, I agree with you as far as it is about the teaching, and it is about the learning and passing on to other people the knowledge that we've absorbed over the years, because it's a never-ending learning situation. You continue to learn and grow until the day you die. Some people think, well, I can study for a year and then I'm going to be it. I know it all, you know, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important to teach and pass that information on. What is the most important thing that people need to know about Egyptian magic? What do you teach in that respect?
Well, I would say whether it's Egyptian magic or any other magic, like any spoken word or action in life, it has consequences. Magic is not something to be practiced carelessly or impulsively. A lot of people, including myself, when I was much younger, act impulsively. You know, we're full of emotion and we're upset, or we just are like, oh, you know, I need to take care of this right now. But you need to understand that casting a magical spell is like throwing a pebble into a body of water. There will be a rippling effect in every direction.
Yes.
And that effect will affect numerous people and environments. So it is very, very important to consider how your magic will result and how it will affect your life and the lives of others involved in the situation or environment. That would be probably my most important thing that I would want people to consider before they practice Egyptian magic or any magic.
Exactly. I think people, all right, so somebody's mad at somebody and they're going to curse that person. You know, they're going to get their due. They don't understand, and here is the ripple effect, maybe very simply put. You can curse that person, but that person has loved ones and family, and what you do to that person, it's going to affect the children, the wife, the mother, whatever. So it's not quite as simple as, okay, that guy needs to be punished, because you could be doing a great deal of damage to a lot of innocent people. And
absolutely.
Yeah, and that's why I think a lot of people should not be doing spells, period, because they just don't get that concept. But it can be really dangerous to a lot of innocent people, especially when we're talking about children. Why should they have to suffer because of somebody's stupidity? And, it does happen, because if somebody is so mad at somebody, the intent is what makes the spell work. And so you're absolutely enraged. You're going to do a really good spell full of hate or whatever you're, asking for. And, how would you feel if you really injured an innocent child or something? And it's just something really important that people don't get. They think spell work is just really cut and dried and simple, but creating a spell, and I'm sure it's the same way in Egyptian magic as it is in any magic, to write out a spell and create it, you have to be very specific with your terminology and your intention. This is what I need to happen, and you have to block out everything else that could possibly happen. You have to think about that first. Well, if I do this, now could this happen, or this, whatever. And you have to be so, so careful with your wording, because you don't want to have that kind of thing on your conscience. But the main thing is that people know, that people need to know that you have to have the conscience, you have to have the knowledge, because if somebody was mad at you, how would you like it if your mother fell down and broke her hip because somebody was cursing you? That kind of thing. So, yeah, okay, we've been preaching, haven't we? Yes. Not a bad thing. Sometimes we get carried away, but it needs to be said. Now, you're talking about teaching and lecturing and workshops. Now, what kinds of lectures and workshops and stuff do you do?
Well, I have tried to, since I'm in the Southeast, I've tried to visit a lot of New Age bookstores and covens and different pagan groups that have invited me to come out and teach them just the basics of Egyptian religion and magic. And a lot of that has to do with just going over, the ritual tools that are used and why they are used in different magical scripts, how to set up altars and things like that. And also, the thing is, Egyptian magic, it can get pretty complex when you look at some of the ancient Egyptian philosophies like the 9 bodies, which ancient Egyptians believed everybody, including humans and animals, had. So I'm not going to go into each of the 9 bodies here, because it would take us 2 hours possibly to go through all of that. It would be a little much.
That's a whole nother show, right?
Yes, that would be a little much, but certainly that is something that I have had workshops about because it also teaches how the ancient Egyptians believe in souls, that yes, indeed, people and animals have souls, and there is an afterlife, there is resurrection, there is immortality. So there's quite a bit to cover. They believed that those 9 bodies were not only important to their religious aspect, but also could be used in magic. So there's quite a bit of ground to cover, which is what had inspired me to actually write the book, Ancient Egyptian Magic, because I thought, well, there's so much involved. If I could just condense it into one book that people could read, and then if they were interested in both the religious and magical philosophy and practices, they'd have everything, in one practical guide that they could refer to.
And the book is not something that you have to be Einstein to figure out. I mean, it reads very easily, and it's just it's one of those books that you don't bang your head against the wall trying to learn. And we all know that there are some out there that you absolutely have to do that. Also, when you're talking about ritual tools, now a lot of stuff that we go into any occult shop and we can find a lot of the very basic things. Is there a shop that specializes in some of these ancient ritual tools that may not be in your everyday shop?
There are a couple of New Age suppliers. Azure Green, that is spelled AZUREGREEN, out of Middlefield, Massachusetts. They do carry a lot of the ancient Egyptian essential oils and different ritual tools and magical tools that you would need. But I've noticed online, if you look up on Google search, of course, or Bing, any of these items that you need, there is quite a large variety. Even Amazon.com, I mean, my God, in our modern age, even carries a lot of these things. Yeah. As far as incense and, amulets like the Eye of Horus, or statues of Bast, or, different minerals or herbs that you need. They do have them.
Good. So it's something easy enough to master, to find anyway.
Yeah.
So if people are interested in learning more, and perhaps want to contact you for further information or get in touch with you in regards to any events that you may be doing, how can people find you?
They are more than welcome to find me on Facebook. I actually have a Facebook page. It's facebook.com/Ancient Egyptian Magic. I also have a Twitter handle, which is the @Egyptian Magic. And if you contact me in either of those two ways, I will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. I am very accessible online. I'm, like I said earlier, at this point in my ancient Egyptian magic practice, it's all about education, and I want to be able to pass these traditions forward, and I hope that future generations will keep them alive so that we always have these wonderful religious and magical practices going forward.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important, and people can buy your books. They can find them Amazon, anywhere else off the top of your head?
Wiser Books, I believe it's wiserbooks.com. They have, they're actually the publisher of ancient Egyptian magic. But yes, you should be able to find the book easily at Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Great. This has been a really quick hour, and I think we covered basically some basics, I think. But I want to thank you for taking the time to come on and talk about it. There's just so many other things. I mean, I'm holding the back of the book, and you're talking about scrying with fire and oil and water and evoking messengers and spirits of the dead, dream visions. Yes. I mean, so much stuff that we really should have stretched this out for another hour and talked about some of that stuff, because it's really, really interesting. So perhaps you'll come back one day and we can get into some nitty-gritty, if that's all right.
I would love to. Listen, if you're ready to talk about evoking messengers and spirits of the dead, you just let me know, and we will definitely go over that.
I'd love to do that. Yes, that would be great. So I'll definitely be in touch. But again, thank you for joining me tonight. And I want to thank everybody who's in the chat room and listening elsewhere. And until next time, everybody, blessed be and merry meet again. Good night.
This has been another edition of Stirring the Cauldron with Marla Brooks. Be sure to tune in next week at this same time for another great guest and more cauldron stirring. Any rebroadcast or other use of this program without explicit permission is strictly prohibited. Copyright 2014. Moonlight Hall by Kevin MacLeod, licensed through Incompetech.com.